Right, there we go. We are live. Perfect. All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to this month's May Book Club with our wonderful guest, Piper J. Drake. I'm going to spotlight Piper, spotlight myself for a moment. Hello,
Hey,
Piper. Welcome to Book Club. It's so great to have you here. Thank you for
thank
joining
you
us.
so much for having me.
Absolutely a pleasure. I am so chuffed that you could join us. Uh, you and I know each other because of other books, because of Gail. We've had the chance to meet over a meal and have a wonderful time. You are a prolific author, though.
Indeed.
I have read so many of your beautiful contemporary romances filled with dogs. Look, the dogs are so great. And you've also written science fiction romance, and you've got this amazing sort of paranormal romance, your Mythwoven series, which I highly recommend to everyone. So this is a little bit out of the ordinary for you by comparison.
Yes. It actually dates back because my steampunk days were writing steampunk were very early in my career, when I was known as PJ Schneider. So that is another aspect about my author career is that over time I was asked to entertain a pen name shift. And so I evolved from PJ Schneider to Piper J. Drake due to the vagaries of the publishing world. But as PJ Schneider, I did write quite a few short steampunks like Keeping Cadence and Evie's Gift. I also was one of the authors responsible for setting in the Ministry Initiative, which was a steampunk tabletop game based on Fate Core. That was inspired by the universe of the Ministry of Peculiar Occurrences by T. Morris and Pip Valentine.
Oh my goodness.
So I have definitely had the opportunity and have been delighted by the opportunity to show how much I love steampunk. And I used to quite often dress up and go to some of the East Coast and the Northeast Coast cons in the New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York area.
Oh my goodness. I have definitely seen some photographs of you dressed up in your time traveling steampunk kit. You look so saucy, so fierce. How did you get into steampunk originally?
Oh gosh, goodness. I think a little bit of it was having encountered quite a few authors in the romance world who wrote sci-fi romance, and steampunk is a spin-off of sci-fi. And there's just a really lovely Venn diagram of authors who love historical romance, love sci-fi romance, and what better way to kind of play with alt history aesthetic but keep and capture the stepping out of one's social norm or social class vibe that steampunk has, because steampunk isn't just gears glued onto things, right? Steampunk is definitely an aesthetic and a little bit of a rage against the machine attitude in which a lot of characters demonstrate that they can step out of the norm. And the Victorian period is such a great time for that because you had so much going on with colonies. You had the merchant class that was really starting to, um, due to the wealth from colonialism, sort of blur the edges between social classes and step outside of the manner of their birth and be able to explore things that they may not have been able to explore if it hadn't been for that time period and the opportunity that was provided by those blurring of the social norms, not
Yeah.
just by class, but probably that was the mm, most noticeable,
Yes.
particularly when you're writing alt history or historical, I think. It's one of those things where class becomes one of the major limiting factors that a character has to strive against, I think.
Right. Well, especially for anyone who's read any historical fiction or historical romance, there's a real stratification, especially in European settings for class. I
Yes.
Cannot speak to the full global experience, but the European experience, classes, it's extremely strict. And having that mobility across classes and also being able to sort of thumb your nose at them is such a delightful sense of freedom. And you are absolutely playing with some of that in this novella because your male protagonist is sort of masquerading as being from a class that is not his. And our female protagonist is definitely coming out of a different class. And they are not compelled to maintain that kind of formality at all in this novella. So I don't want to ask all the juicy questions. I'm going to leave some for everyone who is here today. So I'm just going to leave that nugget out there for all of you. But I do want to ask a little bit about the novella experience
Yes.
because normally you are writing long form novels, full novels, trilogies, even like these sort of beautifully enmeshed series that one series pulls from the other and you follow the characters and their descendants. It's all fantastic. How did you find the pacing of writing a novella compared to writing a novel?
I actually really love to write novellas as a palate cleanser in between writing heavy novels. Now, I say that lightly in the heavy novels relative to my own work, because most of my writing is nowhere near as heavy as some of my colleagues or my very good friends who write in epic fantasy, for example. Those are much chunkier boys. When it comes to those novels, right? Most of my novels are very fast paced. What you'll find that is very characteristic of my novels is that um, because I spent quite a lot of time, particularly my romantic suspense, which is in contemporary, is very, very fast-paced, very similar to the experience of watching TV series in the same genre. So Hawaii Five-O, for example, um, NCIS, Criminal Minds, those kinds of pacings in those episodes, you will find that my novels have that kind of pacing, but they are still heavier in the fact that they have more characters, they have more setting, they have many more plot points in the character journey, right? And they have a lot more conflict going on when it comes to the romantic arc. And we have more time for backstory,
Yes.
to make things complicated and give us understanding of the drivers behind why the characters make the decisions they make. Whereas in a novella, you have to keep it quite tight,
Yeah.
right? There, fortunately, when it comes to the romance genre, one of the lovely things about it is that you are guaranteed a happy resolution. It may not be forever after anymore. Sometimes it is for now because we are in the modern um, romance has evolved to take in the modern lifestyle. And I'm very much a strong proponent of the definition of happy ever after is something that is very specific to those characters. Um, but then again, in a murder mystery, you're guaranteed a dead body, right? Like, so there are some guarantees. One of the things that's lovely about romance is the author is always going to take you on a wild ride in which you're not absolutely sure how they're going to get to the happily ever after. There is some doubt, there is some confusion, there is a I don't know how they're going to make this work, or I don't know how they're going to manage to come to a resolution, right? Like, how are they going to make their lives fit together? How will they figure this out? And that is the driving question. And in my novellas, you have to keep that very tight. You can't challenge that too often, right? There are some beat sheets out there for those who are writers who are trying to include a romantic arc, perhaps in their book, or they are trying to write a romance themselves. And oftentimes there's several different stages of will they, won't they get together, right? It's the hint of oh, this could be, but no, no. And then there's the hint of, oh, but this would be really great. And maybe, right? And then there's another hint of, maybe, but no, but yes, right? And then there's some terrible betrayal in which we say, no, we're it was much safer to be single. And we run away from each other. And then, we come back and we were like, you know what? I like who I am when I'm with you, which is an entire song, a very, very fun entire song. I think that the verse actually goes, I like me better when I'm with you. Right? And there's this idea that, and I'm personally someone who doesn't like to write characters who are incomplete without each other. That's not my vibe. And that is, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not what I prefer to do. What I prefer to do is have each character establish themselves as a whole person, but like who they are when they are with this other person. Perhaps because that person challenges them to greater things. Perhaps it's because this person um, complements them in some way or contrasts them in some way. But I like complete characters who could totally, totally go on with life without each other, but they're happier and they like life better together. And so in a lot of my romances, you'll find that that love and that happily ever after is a choice that they keep making and that they've committed to keep making together. And so the novella experience is tighter because we don't have as many challenges to that. Um, we have zany things going on and we have choices being made, and oftentimes a scene does triple and quadruple duty in that something's happening, but also there's subtext happening behind dialogue and there's subtext happening behind physicality. Hanky panky scenes in particular, I believe, are key to developing trust because there is a lot of trust involved in allowing intimacy. And so the character arc and the romantic arc take a huge step forward during the hanky panky scenes because there's trust involved, not just trust in allowing touch, but trust in communication. Does this feel good? May I do this? Asking for consent, asking for confirmation, having the bravery to say, no, this doesn't feel good. Please don't do that.
Right. Or
Those
be,
kinds of braveries.
yeah,
Ah.
no, so good. Well, and you look, this is probably one of the spiciest pieces of fiction we've read for book club. And
I'm so sorry.
no, I mean, well, look, I knew what I was in for because I have read your works and I love your writing. And I cannot tell you all how much I adore the Mythwoven series because I run out of adjectives to
Oh
express
my
that.
goodness. The second, if you think that this novella is the spiciest you've read, the second book in the Mythwoven series is
So
it's the difference between Japanese curry and Thai curry. Like,
so good. It's so good. But I really loved that in your spicy moment in this particular novella, there really is some character development happening as well as like some surprises, right? Some wonder I don't want to give everything away. Some surprises happening. Steampunk technology rears its head, if you will, and in a spicier setting, which I was like, ah. What a delightful surprise for the reader as well as for the participants in the scene. So you do have some fun steampunk tech and technology, while it's not essential to a steampunk story, is definitely part of the trappings of sort of canonical steampunk. And I suspect that most people reading this novella were like, yes, this is steampunk. This there are airships, but also mad science. So can you share a little bit about how how you decided what tech you were going to include and what inspired you for some of the tech, like the things you created for Cadence, for instance, your female protagonist?
so there's a bit of a Pinocchio inspiration there.
Mm.
Um, and a bit of uh just I think one of the things that I've always loved about steampunk is that it preserves my sense of wonder when I see somebody in the comments like, "Oh, I see it now with Papa." Yes. Um, but just there's a sense of wonder that steampunk has for me that many other types of te technology just don't give me. Dieselpunk is fun, but it doesn't give me that sense of wonder the way steampunk does. for
Yeah.
example. Um, I know a lot of people really like the technology. I write a lot of science fiction romance, right? And I don't lean into the technology in science fiction romance as much as I do when it's in steampunk because steampunk is so much more fun for me, just from the scope of imagination and also very hand wavy, right? Like I don't, it, I make steampunk, my technology in steampunk is hand wavy. I admit it.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
little Star Trek. That's totally good. It's totally good.
Yes, indeed. Like, but one of the things that I wanted for Cadence was for her to be able to do many, many things. And there's also a bit of anime inspiration, right? Like there's a anime called D Gray Man, and Lena Lee actually is a character in D Gray Man who her her use of the supernatural element in D Gray Man impacts her legs. And so I had these visuals from Lena Lee's combat scenes to be able to inspire me for Cadence's ability for movement. And what I wanted for Cadence was she's a bodyguard, right? And she herself is already a naturally protective character. She could lead if she wanted to. She's charismatic enough to do so, but she doesn't want to. She prefers to be supportive. She prefers to be nurturing. She prefers to be very protective. And I wanted to give her technology that gave her the ability to be outstanding. However, I didn't want that technology to be, I didn't want it to be an Iron Man suit where the Iron Man suit could have operated without her,
Right.
right? I wanted the technology to still be under her brain, her mental command, her biometrics, right? So that it's still her who's deciding this is how I'm going to use this thing. These are the moves that I'm going to make. This is strategically how I'm going to make my move. And so my technology is not Tony Stark style, where the technology could have gone off and flown around in a suit by itself. It is very much technology that is intrinsic to the operator, and the operator strategically knows how to use it. And if someone else had the same technology installed, that would still have different outcomes because they would strategically use it in a different way and tactically use it in a different way, right? Cadence's strategy and her tactics are still hers.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Look, there's so much, and I promise everyone I'm going to wrap up because I promised I would not ask all the juicy questions and I would not entirely monopolize Piper today. Although, as you can see, I'm having a very jolly time asking questions. But I just wanted to wrap up with, you've got this amazing technology, and I love your description of how it's under the control of Cadence, that it's her strategically. But you've also built this really, you've hinted at this much greater steampunk world than we get to see in the novella. And you mentioned Evie's Gift, another novella. So my question for you is A, where can we read more of your steampunk? And B, do you ever consider going back and writing more in a steampunk setting? I mean, you're doing a lot of writing, and I have good rumors to suspect that there's a third Mythwoven book coming. So that's also something that's occupying your time. So you've got, deadlines and writing and things you are, dedicated to doing. But will we get more steampunk from you? Or is there more steampunk already out there?
I have to admit, Evie's Gift and Cadence and Keeping Cadence are my two key pieces. There are two short stories out there from the Ministry of Peculiar Occurrences that I think are out of print at this time. It was one of those things where I wrote for the Tales from the Archives, which were an indie effort by the authors to have tales written by other authors, and there are two by me, and they are two that are set in the time period in which the King of Thailand brought Anna Leonowens to Thailand in an effort to educate his court about the Western world. And I chose to be more true to the memoirs of Anna Leonowens and demonstrate that Anna Leonowens was, although a wonderful, incredible feminine figure in history and a suffragette, she was also incredibly biased
Yes.
racially, and it
Yeah.
comes across in her memoirs. Um, and she was also incredibly unforthcoming about the culture clash in a way that was through a very colonial lens,
Mm.
in which she was absolutely certain the British way was correct. Now,
Right.
I say this coming as a person who grew up on The King and I with Yul Brynner.
Yeah, I love that movie,
And I
despite.
do love the music, but there's a reason why that is banned in Thailand for historical inaccuracy, and it is not simply because of the easy comment that criticism of the king is not allowed, right? There's a lot that's inaccurate about every musical and movie that has been based on The King and I, the story, because they've all been based on the novel that was based on Anna Leonowen's work. So all of it is based on a white passing person's lens who was refusing to admit that she also had a person of color in her family history. So she was white passing and denying it. Um, and that is an internalized set of bias that shows in her memoirs and reflects all the way through for any storytelling of The King and I. And so I wrote two steampunk shorts of the of agents of the Ministry of Peculiar Occurrences encountering a Kinari in Thailand, and then
Mm.
later encountering that same Kinari in Japan. And so those were very fun little action-packed shorts. And it was fun to visit that time period because Thailand is unique in the fact that Thailand was never colonialized. It was never colonized, not by the French, not by the English. And part of that was because the King of Thailand very carefully navigated a very difficult diplomatic time and gave up territory on the northern borders. But Thailand itself was never colonized. It's one of very, very few nations in history that wasn't.
That's
Not,
amazing.
and I mean not just in that time frame, but ever.
Right.
Uh, so I think that that was a really interesting time period. And if Anna had had her way, she would have made sure that Thailand became a British colony.
Mm. Mm.
And so a lot of it had to do with her making statements and acting and moving through the courts with her special status as a teacher, um, almost obtusely not understanding
Ah,
culture
mm.
because British colonialism. Right.
Right.
And so you do see that these days. There's a lot of expats here in Thailand who are here and gain a longer visa than a tourist visa by teaching English
Ah.
and never learning, even after 8 years of living in Thailand and teaching English, never learning to speak Thai.
I have so
So
many feelings hearing that.
exactly. So it is difficult to pack those kinds of feelings into a short story.
Yeah.
But those two short stories do exist. They're out there. And then I would love to write more and actually bridge the worlds of Evie's Gift and Keeping Cadence.
Mm.
Evie's Gift is a very, very innocent steampunk experience, by the way. There is no hanky-panky. There is only very, very innocent Regency level blushing that happens quite a lot. Um, and a bit of torn clothing,
A blush
which a
was.
tiny steampunk um, sugar glider that can change is a bit of a transformer, changes to hold on to her fabric for her. It's like, we're going to let her hair go to hold on to her fabric because shocking. But also, Evie herself does have a gift, and I think that it would be very fun to tie those two universes together, Keeping Cadence and Evie's Gift, and continue on with their adventures. So I would love to, but also it does take a certain amount of financial reason to be able to continue with that, and so um, I do partially make my writing decisions based on, contractual obligations in traditional publishing, as well as indie decisions, because I do both trad pub and indie pub, right? So what we have found is that my cozy paranormal mystery, which is a bit like Murder, She Wrote for those who really enjoyed
It's
Jessica
so
Fletcher,
fun. It's
it's a
so
bit
fun.
Murder She Wrote with werewolves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is actually selling and has quite a lot of demand as opposed to my steampunk. So it's a bit zany, it's a bit charming. And and that is the next novella that I will write in between. But I will say that I do have a very short contribution in the land in a completely different genre that will be coming out at the end of 2026 that I must write, that I will be under NDA for and must write. Um, and so that will also be a very fun short contribution in between my novels. Right. So
Oh,
Mythwoven Book 3 is coming. And then we are also working on a completely fantasy, not romance, but fantasy series. So the spice levels in those might be, there's far less focus on that. This is definitely my focusing on a fantasy work. And so the world building, setting as character is going to be much more. My agent is pitching it. I will share with all of you. My agent is pitching it as Wednesday meets Fourth Wing with K-drama vibes. So those kinds of elements can be quite fun. Um, and so it's quite fun. It's quite fun to read and actually, and it's quite fun to write and play with and plot with. Um, but it's also a bit of an adventure because when you look at the appeal of Fourth Wing from a fantasy perspective, it is not traditional epic fantasy wonder,
yeah.
right? It's not the same experience as reading Sanderson or Rothfuss or Martin, or honestly, my fantasy roots come from the Shannara series and Terry Brooks.
Yeah.
I read all of the Shannara series back in the day. Although I read out of order, I started with Elfstones and had to go back and read Sword of Shannara. And then I got in the right reading order and moved forward. But, definitely Brooks. And definitely I have my favorites from the Heinlein series. You know, I'm
Yes.
not a Honor Harrington fan, unfortunately. No, I very, very much prefer Sassenach and the way that Anne McCaffrey um, represented military heroines. And so those are my fantasy roots, right? Anne McCaffrey and Pern, Mercedes Lackey, the Shannara series, heavy duty. I used to read and reread that series every time a new book came out.
This is
So
good. This is so good.
yeah, but Fourth Wing is a different kind of fantasy in the fact that Fourth Wing gives readers what they want in an almost of course, right? Of course, she's going to link with the baddest dragon who never was going to link with anyone ever again. And of course, he's big, and of course, he's black, and of course, she's gonna change history and link with more than one dragon,
Of
right? But
course.
then she does it, and she doesn't ignore the fact that it is an of course.
Yeah.
The author says, I'm giving you what you want, right? I'm giving you what you want, and you can be assured if you keep reading, you're going to get similar delights in every chapter. And the readers keep coming because they're going to get similar delightful feelings in every chapter, right? And that is a different experience fantasy-wise. And some may say a lighter experience, or um, they may not have a taste for it because they perhaps, and it's a bit like tea drinking. Once you've gone very, very dark and astringent with your tea, it is very hard to go back to the more light, approachable teas that beginners tend to drink, right? So I think that you can have a taste for different teas.
Yeah.
And Fourth Wing is definitely a different type of tea tasting than perhaps your older or your heavier epic fantasies. And they are both delightful experiences,
Yes.
right? It's just a mood thing, like what readership mood. And I have to admit that this fantasy is a natural progression from Mythwoven's urban fantasy feel completely into a fantasy, different series, different universe, different world, fantasy experience. But I am keeping it with that light cadence, that light level of humor, and also very, very much acknowledging that there's a lot of course, that's going to happen in each of the plot points. right? Like, of course, this is going to happen because it's a delighter. Of course, this is going to happen because it's delighter, because there's a certain amount of, in this world right now, I don't want to write dystopian
No.
because I would like joy even in the writing of and delighters as I write. And so my fantasy is going to be that lighter fourth wing feel of course. You don't have to feel like you're descending into a different hell. Right? You are actually like we're not going through a different crucible here, friends. Like we are. We are taking a journey with its own sets of emotional ups and downs, but there's going to be a lot of delighters along the way. And I think one of the best dark fantasy authors that I can compare it to, that I strive, may not achieve, but strive and admire to, is Anne Bishop's Black Jewels trilogy.
Oh my
It
gosh.
is
No, look.
dark, my friends.
Oh my goodness. Okay, we can, I want to, but we cannot. No, you know what this means, Piper. You know what this means. You just have to come back so we can do another long form interview because it's too fun. We're having too much of a good time chatting. And I'm just like, I want to follow up that question, but I must take us in to conversation with the rest of our chums who are here.
Yes.
However, comma, let me just say, if you like a little bit of a dark fantasy romance and you are looking for that and you have not read the Black Jewels trilogy by Anne Bishop, treat yourselves. But also it's
Content warning for quite a lot of elements of child abuse and sexual abuse. There is a content warning for that because she gets dark in a very historically accurate
yes,
kind of way.
yes,
Um, but for every extremely difficult moment of despair, there is a light bubble of joy that she
yes,
gives you in the experience of the book. And beautiful, beautiful prose that isn't present in her other series, right?
no,
Her more recent series, The Others, is very, very good, but the writing style is very, very
uh,
suspensey. And it's very, very, it's a different voice. Whereas the Black Jewels trilogy, the prose is lyrical.
yes, that's exactly it. It's wonderful. It's a treat. It's not steampunk at all, but if you enjoy that sort of thing, it's really one of the, I'd say, the godmothers of the whole sort of dark fantasy with some romance experience, at least in the 21st
Yeah.
century. What
Not
century
to
are
be
we in?
confused with dark romance.
No.
Dark dark romance is a different genre.
Yes.
That
Good catch. Good point. Very important.
that explores, let's say, forbidden tropes.
Yes. And
That is the easiest way to do that.
we're not even going to get into that today, but everyone, clearly, I'm going to schedule to have Piper back for a longer interview, for more conversation. We've done it in like last year, so you can go and hear Piper and I wax on for like an hour and a half. Oh, we went for 2 hours, honestly. It was
We did
great.
have fun.
We did. But now let me take us out of this and welcome you all in to the conversation. We are going to have a jolly time talking about Keeping Cadence by Piper J. Drake, our book for May. And you know, my first question is always like, who was your favorite character? This is a smaller, tighter cast of characters because it's a novella. So if you have the same favorite as someone else, totally fine. I ask only that you share one thing about the character that you liked. And then, of course, this is a great opportunity to ask Piper your own question about the book. So, normally I pick on poor Lady June Squirrel to go first, but I'm actually going to pick on Kelsey to start us out today because Kelsey, you are also an author. You've had some wonderful insights to the book already in the comments, and you are one of our author guests later this year. So I'm going to torment you to start, my friend.
That's okay. Honestly, the Pinocchio thing makes me so happy because it puts so much into context for the story. Because, Like the vibes were there definitely with her father, and I just love their dynamic so much, where it would have been really easy to lean into the trope of not approving of his daughter and whatever else. And I love his time like on page is really short, but I thought it was beautifully done. So he's one of my favorite characters for that reason. But let's see for questions. I know you talked about this some whenever you're talking about how you do the hand waving for tech, which I think is totally fair for steampunk, but I absolutely loved Cadence's boots. I thought that was such a smart way to implement the tech. Was there a particular inspiration for the boots, or did you just decided to go with the rule of cool and go for it anyway?
I think part of it was the visual inspiration of Lena Lee from D. Gray Man. I have to say that that anime, I'm always attracted to anime that has not only good artwork when the character is designed, but artwork and movement, which is
Mhm.
way harder to illustrate, right? You can really see how much an anime has budget-wise, by how much they have in original combat scenes. And Lena Lee's movement in the anime was so much fun and so inspiring. Um, and then also, I myself am a dancer. I danced from age 3 to age 28 in both ballet, jazz, like your Broadway jazz, and hip hop. And and I was on point as well. So the mechanics and physics of turns and legs in dance were something that I kept in mind in her movement scenes, as well as I have studied mixed martial arts. So again, I had certain moves in mind for her um, that I wanted, and how would she react against a particular scenario that had, triggered her temper already, or in a situation because she very rarely, if you notice, she very rarely acts in self-defense. It's not her personality. She is most often triggered by defending someone she cares about. That is a part of her character design, right? Like she very rarely moves on her own self-defense. And oftentimes she makes a choice tactically that could that will sacrifice her before it sacrifices the safety of the charge that she's protecting. Um, it's part of her character. And so that's what goes into how she uses her overall physicality. But let's face it, she is a disabled person using a disability aid in those legs. And I tried to the best of my ability at that time. I think that there is still some ableism I could have done better in my writing at the time of writing Keeping Cadence. But I think that that is also because I've learned more with more discourse.
That
So
makes
yeah, that's a definitely a difficult thing to keep on top of when you want a story to age well. Um, but I did not want to cure her disability. Was one of the most important things about Cadence's character. It's like she still is who she is, and she's using a disability aid. She is not cured. Um, and I think that that's also very, very important to have preserved for her.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that you're exactly right, like with keeping up with the disability rep, but I just thought that she was beautifully done and her moves made sense for her size and her build and everything.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
also, the legs are heavier. Let's be real.
Yep.
This is great. And also, Piper, I just love that you put on your dance and martial arts background. I had not realized that you were a dancer, but it makes a lot of sense when I think about that in the context of how you write about the body mechanics. So it was wonderful detail. All right, Cindy Joy, you are up next. Who is your favorite character? And also, please throw out a question for Piper.
So Papa was my favorite character, and I did in my mind when I was reading it, he looked just like Geppetto. So I don't know. So I think I like subconsciously linked him, but that was I like hearing that Pinocchio was a little bit of the inspiration. I sound just like Kelsey. I did last month too. It's we're in sync. But and the yeah, so and my question for you, am I supposed to say what I liked about Papa?
Ideally. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not going to give you like a score or anything. I might just like look at you meaningfully. That's about it.
Yeah, I liked that he really cared about his daughter and his family without judging them for who they were, which is how my parents have always been, and I really hate it when other people's parents are not. It just really I want to shake them. But um so thank you for that. And then my question is about the biomechanics. Did you have to research biology to figure out what kind of things to say while they were putting her legs back together? Did you have to do research, or is that part of your background already?
That is part of my background. In fact, I maintain a parallel career in parallel to my author. I have 25 years as a life sciences consultant in research and development of pharmaceuticals and medical devices. And many of the drugs that you have seen over the years, I have had a hand in, either on the regulatory side as they were being assessed and finalized for market to get approved around the world, medical devices as well, or the development of the electronic document management systems that are used to store the data and present them to the health authorities around the world. And so I have a lot of background and have stood within the foundries as they smelted some of the pieces. For some medical devices that have really saved lives. And some of the experiences, I have had the honor of being present for heart valves that were created for people, in which the valve itself is mechanical, but biological tissue for the flaps was hand sewn on to create these valves. And they are installed in people not by cracking open the chest, which is very traumatic, but rather they're collapsible so they can be installed through the femoral artery up through your veins or arteries and placed using a balloon to open up the valve in place.
So just
Um,
like a cardio cath lab.
yeah, so there are videos of these valves and the entire installation process. I had the pleasure of being there when we brought our first clinical study patients to meet the people who had sewn the flaps into their valves. So the people who had worked on these valves got to meet the people who had the valve in their hearts and had saved their lives. So I have had the pleasure and the honor of being there present for those kinds of meetings where the creators got to meet, or like the people who built the thing got to meet the people whose hearts were beating because of it. And that impacts you, right? And so when we write technology that is is working properly with your biology and you're aware of the kind of things that could happen, that could go wrong, you know, um, but you see that it has worked and it has saved a life and it has improved quality of life. That's the detail doesn't go in the story, but the heart of it is what inspires the writing.
Yeah, just everything they were doing felt really very real and workable and like it would be. Um, uh, Both my parents were in medicine, and I grew up reading the New England Journal of Medicine and all that junk. And my dad, anyway, my dad was an inventor. That was actually what I put on the forms at school, and they would like call my parents up and be like, "Is this right?" And they'd be like, "Yes." And it was, yeah. So, but yeah, but and they would talk about work at the dinner table. So people are always like apologetic when they say something medical to me while I'm eating, and I'm like,
It's totally fine.
normal, normal. Other people don't talk like this when they're eating. But yeah, but it felt really real, and I really, so your medical background totally showed through. And
Thank you so much. I'm so glad that it felt real, in
totally,
a good way. Oh, thank
yeah,
you.
You,
you're welcome.
Cindy. Great observation. Great question. I love that. All right, Terry, you're up next. Who's your
Uh,
favorite character and why?
Good morning for you, good evening for us. Um, my favorite character is probably Jonathan Archer,
Yes.
because she says, "Well, but first I have to tell you," and he says, "Doesn't matter. I don't care. Doesn't matter." He also accepted exactly who she was and liked her for it. So I really liked that about him. My question is, since you know all about body enhancements and parts, um, you personally, what would you like to or would appreciate having enhanced or made more powerful?
It is not a secret if you are familiar with my social media, but I am currently a stage 4 metastatic cancer patient. And in fact, right after this interview, I'm headed to the hospital for my blood work to prepare for my chemotherapy infusion tomorrow, which will take between 12 and 16 hours. We're being rather aggressive with my chemotherapy. And so some of the drugs that I have worked with, it is irony that they are part of my chemotherapy cocktail. I have worked with them. I was one of the team that got them approved on the market. And now they're being used to save me. So I would say at the very cellular level, monoclonal antibodies would be an amazing tech to be able to build on. Because monoclonal antibodies are a type of immunotherapy that is less damaging to the rest of the body than your more traditional chemotherapies. And they're very, very specific to specific proteins on the targeted cancer that you're aiming for. Unfortunately, in my case, we do have to go systemic, which is why we are going with a cocktail of not one, but two chemotherapies, as well as an immunotherapy and an angiotherapy, because my metastatic cancer has spread so far, we cannot target a single type of cancer. And it is a reality that there is no single cure for the concept of cancer. As much as we hope for that in science fiction and fantasy. Um, so when it comes to tech, I think it would be nanotech, and it would be at the monoclonal antibody level because, or something similar concept wise, because it allows you to target a specific, very specific thing rather than this kind of blast the body with poison and try to kill the cancer before it kills the patient, which is effective and has saved a lot of lives. Um,
At a
but
huge cost.
also it has quite the cost. And I can remember it being the fodder for stories all the way back to the Michael Landon days and Highway to Heaven, right? Like there was a whole story arc on that. But also like Mandy Moore in A Walk to Remember. Nicholas Sparks does not write romance, friends. That is romantic tragedy. But these are tales as old as time. Is the terminally ill person and what is the cure, right? And oftentimes the cure, the treatments that they're giving them are so systemic. They're so broad range. Let's try to blast everything. Whereas if we could get technology that is very specific to your biology and very specific to the biology of the thing like cancer that is inside you, the nanotech would be amazing. And also nanotech could improve surgeries like brain surgery. So that is the technology I would really, really love to become very accurately present.
Excellent.
Very
And good
accurate
luck.
because it
Good
goes
luck.
out
Good
of
luck with your blood tests and your
thank
treatments.
thank you. We are very, very let's say positive about how we're looking at it.
That
Uh,
is good
I
news.
I love that you're here and that you are able to talk about it with such facility. Thank you for being so like honest and open with us, Piper. Great questions, Terry. All right, Ronald, you get to go after that. It's your turn, my friend. Who is your favorite character and why? And then if you have a question for Piper, Piper's answering all the questions.
Yes, she is. Uh, actually, you have so few characters in this novella. The one that really I was really impressed with, of course, was um, was the lead character. She is exceptional, I think, of course, for the obvious reasons of her actions, her feelings for her adopted family, you might say, on the airship. And but what I really liked about her was the way that she is developed in such a small area, that is, in so few pages, because you don't have a lot of room to show, you know, the person. And it's done very well, I think. I really like that because you get one impression of her as being the bodyguard. With this enhanced movement, she can do almost anything. She can save everyone. But then when uh, when she has her accident, though there are hints before of a certain vulnerability that she has, such a uh, an uncertainty that she has about herself and how she is viewed by others. That really comes out. That really comes out at the end, and it was really I was very impressed by that. I really, really liked the way that was handled, and and then of course, old Jonathan, you know, he he just says the right things because he knows what he should say because he is so enamored. He has his heart in the right place. But no, I really, really like Cadence. Cadence was my favorite.
Thank you, Ronald. Do you have a question for Piper?
Uh, maybe in the sense that when you're writing a book and you've got a variety of characters and you're laying it out, what type of character do you find most interesting to develop?
Oh, that's so fun. That's a fun question. Thank you. I think it depends story to story. I'm always thinking about my protagonist first, right? In a romance, you have your key people who are involved in the romance. And I always think about them first and what kind of people they are. And also how they complement each other or contrast with each other. Um, you know, and sometimes that comes to me in fun, witty, snappy dialogue. Sometimes that comes to me as a sample of backstory. Um, I am very much a person who uses food in character development. So they may have a childhood memory of how they react to a particular food, maybe good or bad, right? Or they may have a character um, quirk that they're always distracted by apple pie, right? Like, so I like to find those quirks. What are the quirks that I would like to lean into? Um, I will say about all of my characters that all of my characters have a very strong moral compass. That moral compass may not be in alignment with everyone else, but they themselves have their own very strong moral compass. And they themselves also have a very strong sense of found family. So those are characters that I have a tendency to build when I'm creating my characters. They may be good people, they may not be. I, in fact, very, very often like to write and explore characters who are not nice. They have kind hearts and kind actions, but they themselves are actually not nice people. And so they
Hmm.
aren't nice by the expectations of society. So those are some quirks that I have with my characters. And then there's also the fact that I like to explore a range because I very much believe that there are different kinds of strength in this world. And even if you just look at the subsection of my feminine characters, my feminine presenting characters, I don't always write a badass kick-ass heroine. Sometimes I write a heroine who her strength is bringing people together as the core of the family. It's much more of a heroine's journey if you're familiar with Gail Carriger's writing craft book, The Heroine's Journey, in which She is a leader that is not obvious because she brings together all of these other characters and she is their home. And so I like to write characters who are also like that. I like to write characters who are badass. I like to write characters who are very good at killing and very good bad at feelings, right? Like all of these different ranges and contrasts where they're very good at one thing and they're very bad at something else. Um, and it usually has to do with communicating. So that is the kind of character that I like, a character who has nuance. I confess that in the DC world, Superman is not my favorite because he's so very straightforward. In the Marvel universe, I love Steve Rogers and I do love America's ass, but he's so very straightforward. Like he's not his conflict always comes from a very, very straightforward double down loyalty. And while they're iconic characters, I don't like to write them. I like to write characters who aren't that good. Like they're good, but they're not that good. That's the kinds of characters that I like to write. Like they have their own little devil on their shoulder, and sometimes they do the naughty thing, they do the bad thing, or they make the bad choice. And they know they do. They're intelligent. They're not going to avoid it. They're not going to sidestep it. They will take accountability, but they are going to do the thing that is potentially not what society thinks is a good thing to do.
Love that. Also,
Oh,
now I'm thinking of you and Bucky, honestly. Ronald, what a great question.
well,
So
thank,
wonderful. And thanks for being here. You've been such a lovely addition to book club, and I'm so happy you're
well,
here.
thank you very much.
You're
And
welcome.
for you, Piper, I hope the best for you.
Thank you, Ronald. All right, Chuck, you're up next. And please let us know in the chat if you would like to follow up Chuck. No obligation to do so, of course. All right, Chuck, who's your favorite character and why? And then please, if you have a question for Piper, we want to hear it.
Right. Okay. Well, first off, thank you for organizing this. As always, I appreciate it. And for the author to show up, that's quite a treat to be able to actually talk to an author for the book that I've read. So my favorite character is Candace. Uh, just because, well, it's kind of you don't in books you don't get people with disabilities as the main character and the kick-ass main character, and you had no idea that she had a disability. And then all she was, engaging her boots and making jumps that are, amazing and doing and kicking butt and taking names. And then all of a sudden she jumps off the side of the ship and wings come out and she's flying down to the thing. And I'm like, whoa, what's next? What is next is going to happen with this chick? She's just going to bam, something else. And then all of a sudden she gets hurt. And it's like, then you find out that, wow, she is actually such a strong character, but she has the disability. And it's like, wow, having bringing someone with a disability into this role, this character that can kick ass and take names and but still have that amount of hurt or that that disability, having to deal with that. That's really I was I was just fascinated by how you wrote that all together. It was just really good.
Thank you.
Um, yeah. And so for a question, I was trying to think of something. So with the story, it I'm a fatalist, so I believe kind of everything happens for a reason. And in the book, everything just started clicking and clicking and happening. And like how Jonathan was a tinkerer and he was well advanced and had those special abilities with mechanics and stuff. And then it turns out her dad was next level, and that Jonathan was going to go to the event in France.
Exposition. Hmm.
Yeah, the exposition in France, and was just going to try to wing his way into it. And then all of a sudden her dad gives him the ticket to get into it. It's like, so do you start at the end and say, all right, well, I want these two people to get together, and then work your way backwards to the beginning with all the connections, or do you start at the beginning and then just have it just develop?
So that is an interesting question because I am a very combination plotter and pantser, so to speak. I plot and then my characters, as I'm writing, develop and shenanigans occur, and then I have to replot. So the it's a bit like pseudocode for the computer programmers. Sometimes, as I'm writing my chapters, I will write a bit of pseudocode, and it's very much like the early 90s HTML website programming, where I have like an open question here, and I kind of highlight it and leave it open for a bit as I'm writing, and then I have a close question for that problem that I have to decide where it's going to happen and where it's going to come out, right? And if I were a neat programmer, all of that would happen in order and in order, but it doesn't. I'm not a neat programmer. I don't think anybody is, right? And so I have little, and this is where Java comes in, little object oriented bits of plot where I have an open question and I'm like, okay, I'm not really sure where I'm going to close this yet, but I highlight it so that I can remember that I needed to close that question out so that it would be satisfying. And it is quite hard to do in a novella because sometimes you run out of space and you're like, how do I not leave this hanging? And so the characters have to do a lot of multitasking, right? Like different characters have to do different multitasking. And as you build your characters, you're like, well, who's even capable, right? I just watched and introduced Piper Mommy, my mother, to the movie Jumanji, the newer one, not the Robin Williams one, but the Rock one. And they have a scene where all of the characters look at their strengths and their weaknesses. And then there's this really adorable scene where they're like, "You're our missing piece. We needed your skill set. We need all of our skill sets to beat Jumanji." And I think that the approach that I take is very similar to that, in that I have characters and I have created problems for all of the characters, right? Or obstacles or hurdles for them to overcome. And then I'm like looking at the characters, the very limited characters I have in a novella. Who has the skill set to help them overcome said problem? Like, I don't ever like to suddenly create something at the end that conveniently solves the problem. And so I have to try to find one of the existing characters who already had a purpose and see what skill set they had to help overcome the hurdle. And so that's what happens. So it's a bit of both in fact, as like I start from the beginning and I'm creating this plot and I'm creating these characters, and then I'm assessing what outstanding problems that I have that I haven't closed out, and then I work backwards to make sure that I close out problems for a satisfying story. And it is hard to make a novella satisfying, particularly for readers who really often enjoy the meat of a full-length novel. So I do my best.
Thank you. Great question. Chuck, thank you so much. Excellent question. Wonderful observations. It's always lovely to see you, my friends. Thanks for being here. All right, Lady June Squill, I gave you more time than usual. June is an OG original book club member, and so I often start out our questions by harassing her. But I thought I'd be kind today, June, because you look so foxy, and we are talking about the airship Vulpes for this book. So on
Someone
brand.
else is having a very foxy day.
Yes, absolutely. So please, who is your favorite character, my darling, and why? Oh my gosh! It's the corgi! Sorry, I know we have like other things to talk about, but I love your corgi so much, Piper. Look
He's
at him.
very sleepy and having a very foxy face day, so I thought I would show him.
Oh, sweet baby. Oh, there's Corbin, right?
Yes, it is Corbin. He's
Yeah.
very Welsh, and he had a swim day yesterday, and so he's very, very tired.
Oh, sweet Corbin. Look at him. He's just like, we didn't have other questions. We didn't have anything to talk about. We're just
Yes,
here
we
to
did. We
admire
totally did.
Corbin. So excellent. Beautiful. All right, June, but you're not totally off the hook. I definitely did not forget. Oh, you can't find the unmute?
Oh,
I I didn't realize I was muted.
All right.
I should have obviously, but I got distracted by the darling dog. So, also because yeah. Anyway, here we go. Will I see myself? I can't talk without
Oh,
seeing myself. Seeing myself.
just put yourself on speaker view or choose gallery view, which is what I normally use. Then you can see
Okay.
everybody.
Well, I see everybody, but okay. All right. Oh no. That's too many people.
Try speak. Well, actually, I think if you do speaker view, you may not see yourself. I'm not sure.
But
So,
other people have shown up. Well, that's wasting time. Anyway, well, I reread the novella today, and I enjoyed it more because I wasn't as distracted by the sex scenes.
they are
It's
rather
not
saucy.
it's not like I don't like sex scenes, but I was just the first time I read it, it's like, whoa, okay, here we go. And again, here we go. Anyway, my favorite characters, well, obviously Cadence and oh God, I can't speak of you. All I get is her. Anyway, just a sec, let me go back and gallery view. Uh um I really like Cadence. I like Jonathan, although I felt bad that he wasn't going to get to go to the exposition in France. On the other hand, I thought, well, if he went, they'd want to use what he was creating for military purposes. So maybe it's just as well that he didn't get to go. And besides, he was having a great time. Um, then I decided that since other people haven't mentioned the captain of the airship, she's quite the saucy lady. And but then I thought of Minxie. Is it Minxie? Minxie. Minxie, who she knows what she wants and she doesn't want to not get what she wants. And then when she has to drink herself into a stupor to be able to sleep, and I felt bad for her. But so anyway, what was our other questions?
oh,
I'm supposed
your
to ask.
other question is to ask Piper a question.
Oh,
So that
oh,
part
okay.
is kind
I
of easy.
really like the section of the book where he goes. Jonathan goes to the airship docks and he talks about all the different kinds of airships and what they use for lift and for propellant. And so he could figure out how better to make the Vulpes a better airship, and therefore it gives him something to look forward to when he's out of the bedroom. Anyway,
I mean, if we're being real, Jonathan probably would enjoy being in the bedroom quite often. But,
yes, he did
we all
seem to
have
be.
complicated characters and we have other things that fulfill us and yeah, no,
Mhm.
I think one of the aspects of any inventor and tinkerer is the desire to figure out how a thing ticks and also how to improve upon it. And that's something that I think is important in steampunk because in steampunk, everything needs upkeep, right? It needs
Yeah.
tweaking. It needs a bit of oil here. It needs a bit of finagling there, right? And also, engineers are always looking in every genre. How do we make this better? Right? And in a situation where we don't have optimal, um, all the tools at hand, how do we make this work and jerry rig it from what we've got? Right? Like, so you have those things, how to improve upon that thing, and then also how do we jury rig it with what we got? And that's two different kinds of genius, right? And so I like to incorporate that in those kinds of characters, definitely.
Well, I would like in the future, but if you were ever write more about the backstory, I liked very much that you gave Cadence her backstory with how she had been um, in the explosion and her mother had been killed, and that was why she was disabled. But Jonathan, he talks a bit about coming from some background where he came from wealth and his father just brought him toys, and that turned him on to but his father was actually like ran a gambling den, and that sounded like a lot of fun too. So there was all kinds of stuff maybe in the background that would have been fun to follow up on. But thank you.
My pleasure. And I do like to give hints to background that are tantalizing.
Mhm.
Um, but it is very hard to decide how much background to give, especially
Yeah,
when you have limited space like a novella.
right. Yeah.
But
Okay.
it does make one inclined to be like, so if you get the opportunity, we would more. We would love another novella or a whole series because we're irrepressible readers around. Thank you,
We do
Jim.
love
Thank you, my
that.
darling. All right, Jim, you are up next, my friend. Thank you so much. Yeah, and also I'm with Kelsey. Team Minxie gets a novella. So, in your copious spare time, Piper. All right. Hello, Jim. Welcome,
Uh,
welcome, my
uh,
friends.
Well, I
Who
have
is
to say
your
first,
favorite?
I've never read a romance novel. Every time I saw romance in the categories in Goodreads, I'm like, no, no, I'm not going there. Because in my mind, it was Harlequins or it was Gone with the Wind. Oh, Ashley, oh, Ashley. And so I'm like, I'm not good. Or it was some guy with Fabio hair on the cover, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought it was going to
Fabio
be like,
himself.
I am
Yeah.
going to really gag to get through this. And so then I start reading this, and it's like, wow, sex and violence. I mean, it was pretty head on. So I guess, I guess if that's what romance is now, then hey, that's not so bad. I just found it interesting. I guess my idea of romance was totally incorrect from what romance is now. And I hadn't thought of the category of romance tragedy, which you mentioned about Sparks. Yeah. And I think that's a perfect title for it, because yeah, those are like you wallow in pain by the end, I mean, yeah, I guess they're nice and good because we've all had that happen in our lives or somebody. But so anyway, thank you for, I guess, giving me the chance. I might actually try romance again sometime. And I also thought, like, wow, these ladies really like these sexy scenes because to me, romance was more feminine or women driven. I mean, I didn't see guys going to give me a romance novel. So I don't mean to be sexist, but at the same time, I think that was the target audience often. Anyway, and Cadence was my favorite character. I liked the way she jumped in there, and like you say, I think someone else alluded how her character became more vulnerable because I didn't see that till we got toward the end. I'm like, wait, this isn't Cadence, but yeah, it was. And trying to think about that whole idea of how when you're having to be modified, I don't know if that's the right word, but I kept thinking cyborgs from Star Trek, and then I've really enjoyed the series Murderbot. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but the
Yes,
guy who
absolutely.
the guy who is, he feels so inhuman, and he's the most human character and humane character in the whole series. But he's also just this ruthless machine when he has to be, and so I how you struggle with that and how she struggles with, am I really, am I still human? Am I, and then she really needs that back. And as I guess we all go forward with adaptations to our, bodies and all. So I thought that was great. I appreciate you doing that. And I think you've already answered this, but uh, when you're writing something like that, is it hard to let go? Because clearly, I wonder if in your mind there wasn't more story unraveling, not backstory, but forward story. And is it hard to let go, or you keep going? Gosh, there was that other. I really want to take Cadence on down the road, but I've got to finish this thing.
It is very hard to decide where to end it. It is. It is also very hard to figure out where to begin it. I think that especially for a novella, when you have such a um, limited time to tell a story, that you want to make it really impactful and very concentrated and very intense. You don't have time to give the readers time to catch their breath because it is a shorter run for the distance runners here. We're not talking about a marathon run, right? We're not talking about, um, you know, what is an average marathon these days? Is it 20K, 10, 15K? We're talking about a 5K run, right? And so you're going to run at a faster pace if you are a distance runner because it is a shorter distance run, but it is still a distance run. You're not going to thank you. Bill, 26.2K is a full marathon, right? Let's call a novella a half marathon and a short story a 10K, right? Like you have this distance and you're also going to think about your own stamina, how hard you can press yourself at your current speeds and how much you switch between going your fastest and giving it 100% of your all or staying at 75% or staying at 50%. And there's a strategy to it as well because there's hills in storytelling, just like there's hills in long distance running. And a lot of people will say, to very, very carefully measure your strength on that hill. I remember as a cross country runner in high school, there was one hill at the states meet that no one could finish. It was called the bowl because you actually ran down into a bowl and then you had this monstrous 45-degree hill that you had to overcome to run the rest of the race. And it was actually a thing that you have to think about pacing wise to get not only yourself as a writer over that hill, but a reader who's coming on this journey with you and needs the stamina to stick with the story, right? Um, and and so I think that it is difficult to know where to stop the story because yes, obviously both those characters have far more that they could go and enjoy and adventure. But oftentimes when it comes to a romance in a novel, I stop at the decision to be together for the happily for now, which some romance readers actually take me and rake me over the coals for because they want a definitive happily ever after. And there are a high percentage of romance readers who very, very much believe that a happily ever after is required or it's not a romance. They're not willing to accept a happily for now decision. So that's a very difficult balance to make too, and you have to know your readership. Um, and 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 sometimes you have to give your readership that rather than stay true to the characters and what the characters will do. So if you are also a sci-fi reader, for example, you'll notice in Keeping Cadence, Cadence and Jonathan make a commitment to each other for now. If you notice in Hunting Cat, um, Caitlin and Rygard make a commitment to each other for now, right? And I got raked across the coals by some romance readers because they noticed it was for now and not forever. Right. Similarly, I know my darling Madam Askew has read my True Hero series. In book 5, Fierce Justice, again, we say for now, and they're not living together. They are two different people who live in two different places and are agreeing to make the effort to come together to continue their relationship. And there were a lot of romance readers who said that's not a happily ever after because they're not together, right? But in today's modern lifestyles, that's a very real lifestyle, particularly if you're military. As much as I get down on the military and Keeping Cadence, I actually have a lot of ties to the military through family. My partner himself is active duty Air Force. My brother has just recently retired from Space Force and satellites. He started in Air Force, but satellites had to go somewhere, and that's where they went to Space Force. Um, a lot of my family is still active in the Army and the Air Force and the Navy, either in the US or in Thailand. And so I have a deep love for military, and you'll see that come out in some of my stories. And I myself was a student, junior ROTC, founding vice commander, and I received an appointment to the Naval Academy, which I declined because I had academic scholarships that I chose instead. Mostly because at that time I wanted to pursue medicine, and I was only given the option with the Naval Academy appointment and also the offer from the US Marine Corps to become a nurse. And I didn't want to be limited with my major to specifically being a nurse. And since I had the academic opportunity with academic scholarships, I declined those appointments to someone who needed it more. Um, Otherwise, I would be a very different Piper because the military and the academy is designed to break you down and put you back together again stronger. But that is a very, very different personality. But yeah, so I think that in all of that, it is very difficult to know where to start and where to stop when you're telling the story. Because is happily ever after, when happily ever after is indicative of ongoing. I can tell you that readers of Anne Bishop and Black Jewel's trilogy are actually, she lost quite a lot of romance readership, even though this is fantasy and
Oh no, we're having a little lag. We're gonna hope for Piper to be able to come back and finish up with her wonderful answer to that great question.
romance author who can write fast enough.
Good.
Oh,
There was a little lag, but you're back. You're back. We
oh, okay.
lost you for a minute.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
I'm not sure
all
where
right.
you lost me with, but I'm just gonna jump back to Anne Bishop for a minute.
Yes.
Anne Bishop and the Black Jewel series, she is a fantasy author, right? And it is acknowledged that she's a fantasy author. However, a lot of her readership is romance that reads fantasy because romance readers read across many, many genres. They're very cross-genre readers. Um, and so when the Black Jewels trilogy continued across 3 full novels, an entire anthology, and then a second anthology of short stories in that universe, plus 2 spin-off series, three spin-off series in the same universe, she finally brought the main heroine of the original trilogy to her natural lifespan and pass away gently, kindly. And in that same short story novella, the promise was that her love, her epic romantic love, only grieve for a year and then open his heart again to falling in love again. It was a promise she made him make. And romance readers everywhere flipped out. They flipped tables, they threw books across the room, Kindle readers everywhere got broken and shattered on the wall. But it's so real. Happily ever after is indicative of forever, but human lives don't go on forever. And romance readers will accept a widow or a widower at the beginning of the story and give them another happy ever after, but they will not accept falling in love with a romantic group, having them live their happy ever after, and then have someone die and introduce a new member. That is so hard. And Anne Bishop was so brave to do that in her series. Spoiler. But you have to read like 12 books to get there.
You do, but it's honestly, I don't know. I thought that was such a beautiful moment in the series. I thought it was really poignant.
It was beautiful. I cried so hard and laughed for joy of them so much. I admit I have not gone on to the later series because of the way that that develops later. Because I was like, you know what? I've been here for all of this. That development is not something I'm prepared to read right now, right? And that's okay. You can make the choice not to go on that adventure. When the White Rabbit drives up in a car, you can choose not to get in, right? However, I did warn Piper Mommy when she read it because she always takes my books and read it, or I took hers. This is the way I grew up, right? And I'm telling you, 3 a.m. My dogs were, at the time I had quite a few large dogs, and they were all sitting outside Piper Mommy's room because she was living with me at the time. And I was like, why are the dogs concerned? Because and they can open the door themselves, but they weren't. So she was I was like, I need to check on my mother. So I opened the door and she is messy crying, reading this part in Anne Bishop's story. And I'm like, oh, I warned you that that was going to happen. It's 3 a.m. and Piper Mommy is messy crying at this moment. And I was like, oh, good night, Mom. Just leave her to it.
Oh my goodness. Oh, look, Jim, I don't know if you expected your question to take us in this direction, but it's such a great direction. I'm so happy that we could have this conversation about romance and also that you could bring up Murderbot, my personal deep obsession right now. I love Murderbot so much. It's a great character, a great series. So,
Is it terrible that Murderbot reminds me a little bit of Soldier?
no,
Um,
not at
okay, so
all.
sci-fi movie from forever ago
Yeah.
with Kurt,
Kurt
Kurt, Kurt something.
Kurt Russell, wasn't it?
Yes, Kurt
Yes.
Russell. Kurt
Yes, Kurt
Russell,
Russell.
Soldier. Yes,
Yes,
there's
I
a
agree.
lot of elements of of Murderbot that reminds me of Kurt
Yeah,
Russell
I
Mhm.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
in Soldier. Yeah.
It's a great series. If you've never read it, jump in. It's great.
it's wonderful. And the new Apple Plus show is perfect. So, anyway, but we cannot turn this into a Murderbot fan club as much as I love Murderbot. We're here to talk about Piper and Piper's book. And also, Jim, I will get that recommendation to you. In the chat, we've been talking about like, all right, you've found that romance is a lot more varied and diverse than the stereotype of the Harlequin romance. And Piper, I know that this is something you run into as an author of romantic fiction, where people are like, I thought romance was all one way. And then you get to show them it is not. It is not all one way. Your books are actually great examples of the kind of nuance and varied experience you can get as a romance reader. But I've promised Jim that Gail's novels that are based on side characters from her Parasol Protectorate are
Oh
great
yeah.
steampunk romances to start with.
Defy or Defend series. Oh,
Oh yes,
love.
the Biodefend. Exactly, that's the one. That's the one.
Exactly.
Thank you,
Those
Piper.
are a great spin-off and exploratory, and they also will stretch your concept of the binary romance as well, because she's very, very queer. But she's queer in a way that I think is really, really approachable.
Yeah.
So I think that that's fantastic as well. And I'm sure, I believe you have a Discord server. I am absolutely
Yeah.
sure that you can get a lot more sort of gateway romances. Like if you like
Yes,
this, you may enjoy that. And that is
absolutely.
a really good way to explore romance in a guided fashion rather than accidentally getting dropped into someone else's pool.
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
book recommendations are often like that, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things I think about any genre, and you're a genre reader, Piper, as well as a genre author, is that genres are never homogenous. Romance is genre, it's not homogenous. And so following like the flavor thing you like to read into that genre can really open it up for you, and help you find some romance novels that are just your cuppa, so as it were. And also you can romance is wonderful about letting you know what the spiciness is. When we talk about spice, that's how much hanky panky, as Piper says, is happening on the page. I absolutely recommend like JD Robb's in-depth series if you want something that's like sci-fi, suspense, romance, a lot of fade to black. So it's great. All right, Bill, now that I've gone on my tear and interrupted everything to be like, let's talk about romance for a moment, we're going to wrap it up with you today. A wonderful conversation with Piper, talking about this month's book, Keeping Cadence. It's a novella. We've had such a joyful time discussing it, Piper. Thank you for being here with us from Bangkok at 6:30 in the morning. Bill, who was your favorite character? And do you have a question for Piper?
Yeah, my favorite character was Cadence by far. Right, she she embodied a really good balance of being super capable and kicking ass, but also she had vulnerability and insecurities about that vulnerability too, which made her really at first I thought, oh geez, she's kind of a Mary Sue, but then this other stuff happens and it it threw the character into uh much greater detail for me. I mean, made fleshed her out a whole lot, and it that really sold me on the character. Um, Great story, Piper. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
the canoodling was great too. My question is, when do you sleep? Because I mean, you have all this biomedical knowledge. You're talking about several different programming languages pretty competently. You're a writer, so when do you sleep?
Not often. I'm very skilled at the art of the power nap.
Mm.
When Corbin takes a nap, I take a nap. We're very good at it. But no, really, I actually get about 6 to 6.5 hours of sleep every day. And that was before I entered into chemotherapy. And now I sleep a lot more, especially
Yeah.
in week 1 of my cycles. Um, but I think one of the things that you're noticing is a personality trait of mine to explore anything that excites my curiosity. I am a jack of all trades. I made a choice very, very long ago as a child that it was okay to be a duck. Now, this will lose something in translation because it was a childhood impression that my paternal grandfather gave me in Thai, where he said that um, an eagle flies better than a duck, and a penguin swims better than a duck, and an ostrich runs better than a duck. But an eagle can't swim well, and a penguin can't run well or fly, and an ostrich can't fly, nor can it swim well. And he said, a duck can fly and swim and run. And he said, so of that, what do you like more? And I said, I like being a duck. And this is before I knew about the terrible, terrible misogynistic, rapey tendencies of mallards, and what evolution has done to facilitate that, by the way, which is, if you've ever seen that, don't Google it, okay? Or if
Yeah.
you do, use
Absolutely.
DuckDuckGo, don't use Google, and use a VPN. But in any case, evolution really, really facilitated that in a rather terrible way. Um, but I wanted to be a duck, and I chose that as a very young age, and that is definitely against the parental desire to have your child be successful by becoming a doctor or a lawyer, because I wouldn't buckle down and um and niche. Uh, so it is a characteristic of my personality to pursue different curiosities. And that's what you're finding. And I am 48 going on 49. So I've had some time to develop those interests. So I don't necessarily do all those things all in a given day or week or month, but I do go through visits of it. Like, for example, quite recently, I had only ever played with Minecraft here and there a little bit in the past, but for some reason, some friends of mine opened up a server so that I could have a cozy experience farming in survival mode in Minecraft, which means you're constantly getting blown up and you're constantly getting murdered by zombies and shot by skeletons because that's cozy, right? But that's a cozy gaming experience. And um and so I've been playing Minecraft quite a few hours of the day every day for a couple of weeks because I was having fun building stuff in Minecraft. And then um you know, I'm a little bit behind on World of Warcraft, the War Within. And so I will leave Minecraft behind for a while and I will go catch up on the storyline and campaign adventures within World of Warcraft. And then, so I have a tendency to pick up passions and then allow them to sit for a bit and cool down while I go pick up a different passion. Um, I have coded a bit in my past, particularly in college when I wanted to get out of a lab, um, particularly the fruit fly experiment for genetics, because it's a very smelly endeavor. And I was already an organic chem, so I smelled like the green yard. I smelled like acetone all the time. And I didn't want to combine that with the fly nap that you use to knock out flies. So I wrote a Visual Basic program for computer to simulate the fruit fly experiment and allow students to get F1, F2 generations and do the chi-squared analysis to be able to take mutations and figure out and map them to the appropriate chromosome. Um, and so I took the time to learn to program to do that so that I didn't have to actually do the lab again because I had done it for a different class. Um, so I'm not a good programmer. I understand concepts. It is not my passion. And in fact, I program better on paper than using an actual tool to write programming. But I understand the concepts. I understand that a good programmer will comment their code, and a programmer who actually wants to keep his job will not. A little bit of that kind of stuff. Um, but yeah, I'm a jack of all trades, and I pursue my passions in small sprints each time. And when I sleep, I do kind of dream about the thing that I'm obsessed with. Like I have probably replayed Stardew Valley maybe 7 or 8 times. I go back. I'm still a very heavy duty StarCraft 2 player, um, with deep love for that. I do participate in the alpha or beta of various games like Stormgate. I was in the alpha for that as well as the beta. And you can see the inspirations from StarCraft 2 that Stormgate has. I do play Northgard. I do play a lot of the other MMORPGs. So it's passions, right? Like it's exploring passions. Um, and you kind of do task switching to get that time to pursue that.
Ah, brilliant. Oh, and thank you, Bill. Such a great question to wrap up on. Piper, thank you for sharing. It's like from one gamer to another. It's delightful to hear about some of your gaming passions, but also the way in which you balance your interests and have committed to being a duck. I love that story. It's so quintessentially you in the best possible way. I just love that. Everyone, it's been such a pleasure being here today with our wonderful guest author, Piper J. Drake, discussing the novella Keeping Cadence, our May read. We will be back in June, of course, but it's been such a joy to share this time with you, Piper. If you like Piper's writing and you would like to read something a little bit longer and juicier, I absolutely recommend the Mythwoven series. The first 2 books are out. It's a beautiful paranormal urban fantasy, pulling on a lot of Southeast Asian mythology. The writing is exceptional. I know you're right here, Piper, but I mean, I say that even when you're not in the room. I just love
Well,
this
the
series.
mythology is global, right? We do touch on the red shoes from Europe, as well as quite a few other things. It's a bit of the Librarians meets Warehouse 13 meets
Good.
the Vampire Diaries, really. It's just
So good. It's so good. It's fantastic series. You mentioned your wonder, oh my gosh. I'm just gonna blame the brain fog, but your wonderful series about the military and dogs and romance. That series is
Mystery
also
Hero series, yes.
oh my gosh, so mortifying. So there's a lot of wonderful things to read by Piper out there. Piper, I know that we all are wishing you the very best fortunes as you go into your treatment and continue with this journey. You have to do all the things because you have to write all the things. I'm
I
sorry,
do have a lot of more stories that I plan to tell,
there's
and I'm working on
no
it.
choice. Good, good. I have strong opinions on this. So I will try and schedule with Piper to have you back for a longer form interview. Clearly, we have more to discuss. We could go on for hours, but as we are wrapping up now, I am thank you, Bill, who's on the ball. Our next month's book is Terra at Tierra de Cobre by Michael Merriam. It's from the wonderful Queen of Swords Press. Michael will be joining us. That book club is June 22nd at 4:30 p.m. Pacific. It'll be right here in our virtual tea parlor again, and also streaming on YouTube. To everyone who's watching on YouTube, thank you so much for joining us there as well. But to our wonderful friends here in Book Club today, I'm so happy you could join us. Thank you. I know Wild Wild West Con 13.5 is also going on, so thanks for being here with us today. Welcome to our newest member, Anne. Thanks for joining us. And please remember as we go out into the world, as we are wrapping up, to treasure yourselves as I treasure you. And that means, just like Piper, you have to take good care of yourselves. You need to wash your hands, get your vaccines and boosters. We believe in science around here. So do embrace the science and also drink the good tea. Wear the tiara to go buy eggs. If we're going to live in a Marie Antoinette world, dress for it. And just remember that if you don't take good care of yourselves, I am forced to haunt you like an enraged cat, and you will never know a moment's peace ever again. Will not every teacup off every counter forever. So take good care, my darlings. I will see you next month for tea and nonsense and books. Thank you, everyone. Piper, if you're able to stay for a moment, that would be delightful.